这个故事如果你听起来不累，那么你的英语能力在美国日常生活是完全够用的。像学母语一样学英语，我们开始吧。
On June 18th, 2026, the people of Moscow woke up to the sound of sirens. Moscow is the capital city of Russia. But on that morning, the sky was on fire. It was terrifying. This happened because Ukraine launched a massive drone attack. Ukraine sent so many drones at the same time that the city's defense system couldn't handle it and stopped working. On that single morning, Ukraine sent nearly 200 drones straight toward Moscow. Across all of Russia, Ukraine sent more than 500 drones. About 3 years ago, Ukraine sent less than 10 drones to Moscow. But now, nearly 200 drones flew into the capital on a single morning. What did these drones hit? They were very precise and hit a massive oil refinery. A refinery is a giant factory that turns thick oil into gasoline for cars and airplanes. This factory is only about 15 kilometers away from where the Russian president lives. This single factory gives Moscow about 1/3 of its gasoline and half of its diesel fuel. The drones hit 5 key parts of the factory, and huge fires started. The smoke was so thick that the sky turned dark. People living nearby said that a black rain fell from the sky. It was a mix of coal ash and dirty oil. And then something crazy happened. People saw a Russian air defense missile accidentally hit their own giant oil tank. The explosion was so powerful that the heavy metal roof of the tank blew off and flew high into the air. On the same day, another big oil factory in southern Russia was also hit and started burning. But the fire was not the only problem. Back inside the city of Moscow, the attack caused panic. The 4 main airports had to close down completely. At the biggest airport in the city, people had to run out of the building. More than 500 flights were canceled or delayed. Because there were so many drones in the sky, the air defense systems went crazy. Pieces of drones and missiles fell onto the city. A huge shopping market caught fire. A tall apartment building was hit, and people had to run for their lives. 17 normal people were hurt. A dark cloud of sadness fell over the city. Before, the war felt like a story on TV. It only meant higher prices for bread and gas. But looking at the burning sky, they knew the truth. The war had finally come home. There was nowhere to hide. Where was the Russian president when his capital was burning? The president was in a city far away. He was having a meeting with leaders from Southeast Asia. During his press conference, he did not say a single word about the attack on Moscow. The Russian leader faced a difficult choice that day. He could give an angry speech and promise revenge, or he could stay completely quiet. If he promised revenge, the people would expect him to stop the drones. But he knew the truth. He could not stop them. If another drone hit Moscow the next day, he would look like a weak leader who could not keep a promise. So the president chose to stay quiet. He chose to ignore the problem. The official television stations just said, "Our air defense did a great job. We shot down almost everything." But this event brings up a huge question. Moscow is supposed to be the safest city in Europe. It has the most advanced air defense systems in the world. How did cheap plastic drones fly right past the defense systems? To understand this, we have to look at the new rules of war. Real war today looks exactly like a cold computer strategy game. A commander sits in front of a screen, looking down at a map. He can see everything. He clicks a mouse, and his weapons attack. In the past, armies could hide. But today, there are no secrets. Satellites in space and cheap commercial drones in the sky see everything. Ukrainian commanders look at computer tablets. On the battlefield, if a Russian tank drives out of a forest, a red dot appears on the tablet. The commander clicks the dot, and within 2 minutes, a bomb falls exactly on the tank. Game over. Let us talk about physical limits to understand how the drones got past the defense systems. The Russian air defense system has a radar, like a glowing eye. But this eye can only focus on a few things at once. The system's computer can only guide missiles at 4 targets in the exact same second. So what happens if Ukraine sends 30 drones at the exact same time from different directions? The system is overloaded. The computer tries to shoot the first 4 drones, but the other 26 drones are now in a blind spot. The system sees them, but it is too busy to shoot them. Also, heavy guns have limits. If a big gun shoots thousands of bullets in 1 minute, the metal gets very hot. It can get to hundreds of degrees. The gun must stop to cool down, or it will break. It also takes time for a heavy metal gun tower to turn from the east to the west. If the system takes 9 seconds to shoot down the first 3 drones, the other drones have already flown the last kilometer and crashed into the target. In the sky, Ukraine uses a very smart strategy to make this happen. It is like a combination punch, and it is deadly. First, they send the cheap stuff. Ukraine sends dozens of very cheap drones. Some are just made of plastic and have no bombs inside. Why? To force the Russian radar to turn on. When a radar turns on, it sends out radio waves. It is like turning on a bright flashlight in a dark room. Now, Ukraine knows exactly where the radar is. Also, this defense system only holds 12 missiles. The cheap drones force the system to shoot all its missiles and run out of weapons. Next, they kill the shield. Once the Russian radar is shining bright and their missiles are gone, Ukraine sends a second wave. These drones follow the radar waves directly to the source. They crash into the radar truck and destroy it. Finally, they break the heart. Now there is a hole in the defense system. Ukraine sends heavy drones or expensive missiles through the hole. These go straight for the oil refinery or the command center. This perfectly explains how the drones got through. But there is another crazy question. Remember that heavy metal roof blowing into the sky at the beginning of our story? Why did a Russian missile become a helper in destroying a Russian factory? Imagine this. It is like being in a room full of expensive glass cups and plates. Suddenly, 100 flies fly into the room. You take a shotgun and start shooting at the flies. You might kill a few flies, but you will destroy all your own expensive plates. The drones force the defense to shoot everywhere, and the defense ends up destroying its own city. This is exactly what was caught on video in Moscow. A video showed a white smoke trail in the sky. This smoke trail only comes from a very fast Russian air defense missile. The video showed that the Russian missile was trying to chase a low-flying drone. But the missile lost its target. Because it was going so fast, it followed its path and crashed straight into the Russian oil tank. Yes, the Russian air defense blew up their own oil factory. Ukraine uses this strategy for another big reason: the cost. The money difference in this war is crazy. A Russian air defense missile costs between $100,000 and $2 million. A Ukrainian drone costs about $50,000. Ukraine uses a few cheap drones to destroy a defense machine that costs millions. That is extreme profit. Of course, Ukraine has the same problem. When Russia sends cheap drones, Ukraine has to use advanced American missiles that cost $3 million to shoot down a drone that costs $20,000. You might ask, if drones are so cheap, why doesn't Ukraine just build 4,000 drones, wait for a month, and launch them all on the same night? There are physical limits. First, big drones need runways to take off. You cannot launch 4,000 big planes at once without huge airports. Second, If you put 4,000 drones and millions of liters of fuel in one place, Russian satellites will see it. Russia will send heavy bombs to blow up the warehouse before the drones ever take off. Third, if 4,000 drones fly in the sky at the same time, their radio signals will crash into each other. The drones will get confused and crash. Finally, if you wait for a month to attack, you give the enemy a month to fix their broken factories and build stronger defenses. Instead, you have to attack every week to keep the enemy bleeding. To keep this pressure up, you need the right tools. So, let us look at the flying machines themselves. They come in many sizes, and the technology is changing faster than ever before. First, there are the long-range drones. Think of them as cheap, long-range missiles. Ukraine has a big drone. It costs about $200,000. It is the size of a small car and needs a real road to take off. Ukraine also uses a slow drone. It costs only $20,000 to $50,000. It uses a very cheap engine, like an engine from a motorcycle or a lawnmower. It flies slowly, less than 200 kilometers per hour. But it uses very little fuel, so it can fly 1,000 kilometers. The engine does not get very hot. This makes it hard for Russian heat-seeking missiles to find it in the sky. To fix the slow speed, Ukraine started putting jet engines on some drones. These fly much faster, maybe 600 kilometers per hour. But the jet engine has a fatal weakness. The fire coming out of the back of a jet engine is extremely hot. To a heat-seeking missile, the jet tail looks like a bright sun in the dark night sky. It is very easy to lock onto and shoot down. Also, small jet engines are very expensive, so they cannot use them for everything. Next, we have the short-range drones. These are small plastic racing drones, like the ones kids use. They cost only $300 to $500. They fly fast, up to 150 kilometers per hour. But they can only carry 1 or 2 kilograms of weight. So soldiers take strong tape and tie a hand grenade to the drone. These small drones only fly for 10 kilometers, and the battery dies in 15 minutes. Here, the pilots face a choice. Do they save half the battery to bring the drone back, or do they use all the battery to fly further? They choose to crash it. It is simple. If they try to bring it back, the drone cannot fly far enough to reach the enemy. Also, the battlefield is full of bullets and signals. The drone will probably crash anyway. It is a simple math choice. Lose a cheap drone, but destroy an expensive tank. The drone must become the bullet. But flying is not easy. The sky is full of invisible walls. This is called electronic warfare. Russia has huge trucks that create electronic black holes. They send out strong radio waves that block GPS signals. Without GPS, a normal drone goes blind, gets lost, and falls out of the sky. This is a zero-cost way for Russia to defend itself. How does Ukraine fight back? Ukrainian engineers use cheap magic, and it works perfectly. First, they put a cheap computer chip inside the drone. It costs maybe $20. When the GPS dies, this chip feels how the drone is moving. It guesses the direction and flies blind for a few kilometers until it gets out of the black hole and finds the GPS again. Second, the engineers give the drone an AI brain. They put a cheap camera and a small computer on the drone. Before it takes off, they show the computer a picture of the oil tank. When the drone flies close and the radio signals are blocked, the AI brain takes over. It looks through the camera, finds the shape of the oil tank, and steers itself into the target. Because the brain is inside the drone, Russian radio jammers cannot stop it. Of course, Russia is not sleeping. They are also using AI. They are frantically researching new drone technology to fight back. It is a terrifying race. But what exactly are they striking? If you look closely, you will see a big difference in targets. Why does Ukraine bomb Russian oil factories but almost never bomb Russian power plants? And why does Russia bomb Ukrainian power plants? They have different logic for destroying the economy. Ukraine attacks oil because it is smart. A power plant is made of very thick concrete. If you hit a power plant with a small drone, it is like throwing a firecracker at a big rock. Nothing happens. Also, Russia is huge. Many power plants are deep in Siberia. The drones cannot fly that far. But an oil refinery is different. It is full of fire and gas. The skin of an oil tank is thin metal. It is a giant bomb waiting for a match. But actually, Ukraine does not want to hit the oil tanks. If an oil tank burns, firefighters can use chemical foam to put out the fire. It is just burning the product. It hurts, but it is not fatal. The Ukrainian pilots are trained like engineers. They aim for the heart of the factory. The heart is a tall metal tower that boils the oil. If this tower breaks, the whole factory stops completely. Not a single drop of oil can be made. These towers use special technology from America and Europe. Because of strict rules from America and Europe, Russia cannot buy new parts. It takes many months, maybe a year, to fix one tower. This strategy hurts the country's wallet. It hurts a lot. Russia is like a giant gas station pretending to be a country. 90% of the money for the army comes from selling oil. If the factories stop, he cannot pay his soldiers. Also, the thousands of tanks on the front line need diesel every day. If the factories burn, the tanks cannot move. On the other side, why does Russia bomb Ukrainian electricity? First, Ukraine builds many drones in secret underground factories. Without electricity, the heavy machines cannot cut metal, and the factories stop. Second, American and European weapons are moved by electric trains. If the power stops, the trains stop. Third, radars and command centers need a lot of power. If the city goes dark, the army has to use small generators and burn precious diesel just to keep the computers running. In the east, Russia specially targets a city called Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the second biggest city in Ukraine, but it is only 30 kilometers from the Russian border. When Russia fires a missile at Kharkiv, it only takes 30 to 60 seconds to hit the ground. The air defense has no time to react. Often, a building falls down before the siren even sounds. Why doesn't Ukraine use advanced American missiles in Kharkiv? Because it is too close to the border. If they put one there, Russia will easily destroy it with a cheap drone. So, Kharkiv is naked. Russia drops giant bombs, weighing up to 1,500 kilograms. They glide through the air silently and destroy whole apartment buildings. They want to turn the city into a ghost town and push 1 million people out as refugees. Think about this for a second. Why doesn't Ukraine use American and European missiles to bomb Russia's oil? Because they face a hard choice between winning today and surviving tomorrow. It is a painful choice. To Ukrainian commanders, those Russian oil factories look like a mountain of gold. But they look at their expensive American and European missiles, and they cannot push the button. Every American and European missile is attached to an invisible chain. America and Europe made a strict rule. Ukraine can only shoot at pure military targets, like a jet base or a radar. If Ukraine uses a British long-range missile to hit an oil tank, America and Europe will get angry. So Ukraine has to choose. They could hurt the enemy's economy with American and European missiles today, or they could keep receiving money and weapons for tomorrow. They choose tomorrow. They follow the rules to keep the American and European weapons. They save the expensive missiles for military bases, and they use their own cheap drones to bomb the oil. Now let us look at the ground. With all this focus on machines, oil, and AI drones flying in the sky, you might ask a simple question. Why are real human soldiers still hiding in muddy trenches? Why? Why don't they just use robots for everything? Because machines cannot hold land. The final rule of war is, whoever has their boots on the ground owns the land. A robot dog will run out of battery. It will get stuck in the mud. An enemy soldier can throw a blanket over its cameras, and the robot is dead. AI cameras get confused by fake inflatable tanks or smoke bombs. But a human soldier is the ultimate computer. An old soldier has a gut feeling. He can feel the wind. He can guess if the enemy is tricking him. Even if all the radios and radars are broken, a human soldier will jump out of the mud and fire a rocket perfectly. Humans use drones as long arms, but the human must make the final kill. Because humans are needed, Russia uses a terrible strategy. It is brutal. It is called the meat attack. Russia needs to find out where the Ukrainian guns are hidden. If they send a tank, Ukraine will destroy it with a cheap drone. So Russia uses human lives. They take heavy criminals from prisons, murderers and thieves. They put them in groups of 10 or 20 men. They tell these prisoners to walk toward the Ukrainian trench. These men have bad guns and almost no training. They are going to die. But that is the plan. When the prisoners walk forward, the Ukrainian soldiers have to shoot at them. When Ukraine shoots, the Russian drones high in the sky can see the flashes of light. Now the Russian commander knows exactly where the Ukrainian machine guns are hiding. In this dark game, Russia uses 50 human lives to make Ukraine waste 200 valuable heavy bombs and drain their drone batteries. When the Ukrainian guns get too hot and their drones fly back to get new batteries, there is a quiet moment for a few minutes. In that short window, the professional Russian soldiers run forward and take the trench, stepping over the dead bodies of the prisoners. How can a leader send his own people to die like this? Because of his past. He was trained by the KGB, the secret police. The KGB gave him a freezing cold mind. On his map, soldiers are not humans. They are just cheap numbers to trade. He does not feel sad for the dead. He only calculates the profit and how to win. What happens to the prisoners if they get scared and try to run backward? Behind them are special Russian guards called barrier troops. If a prisoner runs back, the guards shoot him. They are told they cannot retreat. They must walk forward until they die or win. But this dark strategy is poisoning Russian society. If a prisoner survives for 6 months, he gets a pardon from the president. He goes back home as a free man. Now, stop and imagine this. Imagine a serial killer or a man who abused children. The criminal goes to the war. The criminal lives in the blood and mud of the trench. He comes back home with PTSD. This means his mind is deeply hurt by the terrible things he saw in the war. He starts drinking alcohol. His mind breaks down. Now he is back on the streets of Russia, and he is more violent than ever. In towns across Russia, terrible crimes are happening. Women and children are being hurt by these returning soldiers. But the police are afraid to arrest them. Why? Because these killers wear the Medal of Courage given by the president. Also, Russia has a strict law. You cannot say anything bad about the army. The criminals stand in court and shout, "I bled for this country." They become untouchable. There is a famous true story. A man brutally murdered his young girlfriend. The court sent him to prison for 17 years. But a few months later, the victim's parents saw pictures of him on the internet. He was holding a gun on the battlefield. 6 months later, he was fully pardoned and went home free. Imagine being those parents, walking down the street, knowing you might bump into the man who killed your daughter. Here, the Russian government faced a terrible choice. They could keep their promise and let these criminals go home after 6 months. If they did this, the criminals would continue to hurt innocent Russian people. The society would break down. Or they could keep the criminals in the army, but break their promise. The government chose to protect the streets. Because the people got so angry, and because the army is running out of men, the government secretly changed the rules. The new prisoners do not get to go home after 6 months. They must stay and fight until the war is completely over. There is no escape. They will stay in the mud until they die. Now, the Russian president is caught in a trap. He cannot stop the war. If he stops and goes home, the angry nationalists and the army might turn against him. A dictator who looks weak usually dies. But if he keeps fighting for years, the economy might break, and hungry people might riot in the streets. So, what is the dictator's plan to end it? The dictator will never say, "I surrender." When he cannot fight anymore, he will just change the definition of winning. He will tell the TV stations to talk about how the economy hurts. He will ask mothers to go on TV and cry for their sons. Then he will give a speech and say, "I am a good father, and I hear the tears of the mothers. We have already protected our land in the East, so we will stop fighting now." He will blame the generals for any mistakes and keep his power. You might think, doesn't Russia have nuclear bombs? Russia has 6,000 of them. Why didn't he use one when drones hit Moscow? Because nuclear bombs are a political trick. They only have value when they are sitting on the launch pad. If he drops a small nuclear bomb on a trench, he kills a few thousand soldiers, but it does not win the war. It will just make the Ukrainians fight harder. But the cost is too high. The United States told the Russian president privately, "If you use a nuclear bomb, America and Europe will enter the war with airplanes and destroy the entire Russian army in a few days." The real nightmare for the Russian president is happening inside his own country. He faced another huge problem. The army was busy fighting in Ukraine. There were not enough soldiers left to protect the oil factories inside Russia. He had to make a choice. He could leave the factories unprotected from drones, or he could let rich businessmen build their own private armies to protect the oil. Both choices are very dangerous. If the factories burn, the country runs out of money today. But if rich men have private armies of 2,000 men, they might fight the central government tomorrow. He chose to protect the money today. In March 2026, he signed a law to allow the giant state-owned gas and oil companies to build their own private armies. They can buy heavy machine guns and armored cars to protect their oil factories. The Russian president did this to divide power. The president remembers when a mercenary group got too strong and tried to rebel against him. Now he wants 10 different billionaires to have small armies. They will watch each other and fight each other for business contracts, so no one can challenge the president. It is a careful balance, but this is a terrifying gamble. Right now, he is the boss that holds them all together. What happens if he gets sick or dies? The central government will freeze. These private armies only listen to the boss who pays their salary. The regular army generals might join forces with the rich oil billionaires. The country could break into pieces. Warlords with heavy weapons would fight each other in the streets for control of oil pipes and seaports. And remember, this broken country has 6,000 nuclear bombs sitting in secret bases. If a warlord gets a nuclear bomb and sells it to terrorists, the whole world is in danger. This is why he lives in extreme fear. He is a former spy. He does not use a smartphone or the internet because he thinks they are traps. He gets all his news from printed papers brought by his spies. When he meets leaders, he sits at a table that is several meters long to avoid sickness and assassins. He even has someone taste his food. He is totally alone in his power. And while he sits alone, the machine of war keeps running. As the days went on after the attack on Moscow, the war did not stop. From June 19th to 21st, Ukrainian drones flew more than 300 kilometers and blew up oil ports near the sea. They hit bridges. They caused a massive fuel crisis in Crimea, forcing the government to take all gasoline away from normal citizens to give to the army. Now, with all this destruction, you might wonder if the two sides will ever sit down and talk about peace. The answer is no. Peace talks have become a political joke. Recently, the Ukrainian president played a trick. He wrote an open letter to the Russian president. He asked to meet for peace, but in the letter, he laughed at him. He said, "We would love to send our long-range drones to visit you." The Russian president was furious. He refused to meet. The Ukrainian president knew he would say no. He just wanted to show America and Europe that Russia is blocking peace, so they will keep sending money. Because peace is impossible, the fighting just speeds up. It gets faster. The war is now a dark machine run by engineers. Ukraine's new defense minister is a 35-year-old boss of a tech company. He manages the war like a tech business. He looks at data. He sets goals to use AI to kill 50,000 enemies a month. Look at what is happening. Ukraine is losing its young generation. Millions of women and children have left for Europe and may never return. Its eastern farmland is poisoned with the most landmines on Earth. Russia is burning its future, eating its savings, pulling out old tanks from the 1950s, and printing money until it loses its value. Today, the United Nations says it would cost only $40 billion a year to stop extreme hunger in the whole world. But for this war, Russia has spent over $100 billion. America and Europe have spent over $200 billion. Rebuilding Ukraine will cost $500 billion. Think about the human brains. The smartest AI experts, the brightest young engineers in Eastern Europe, and hundreds of billions of dollars are not being used to cure cancer. They are not being used to fix climate change. All that brainpower and money is focused on one single tech tree: how to more perfectly, more efficiently turn the living humans on the other side into meat. In the sky, we have the most advanced flying machines of the 21st century. They are invisible and powered by AI. But down on the ground, Human beings are sitting in the freezing mud, cutting each other's throats, just like they did 100 years ago in World War I. There are no winners here. No one. Just a future burned to ashes.
太棒了，你把故事听完了，你离英语自由又近了一步。欢迎加入频道会员，支持频道发展。会员可获得影片的中英文对照学习资料、跟读练习视频、影片、MP3 文件等福利。这里是像学母语一样学英语频道，我们下个视频见。